doing manual work when it comes to establishing a masjid. It's a lesson for us, basically. Sometimes in a society, people tend to kind of get elevated, to such a status that it becomes unbecoming of them to do these type of things, which shouldn't be the case. That's not the mentality that we should have. It's mayub nahi hai. It's not unbecoming of a hafiz, alim, or qari to get his hands dirty, to do a little bit of painting, decorating, to do a little bit of building work, lifting some bricks. It doesn't harm the reputation at all. If the Prophet ﷺ can do that, lift stones himself, then we who associate ourselves with the Prophet ﷺ, we shouldn't have any shame or embarrassment in doing these type of things, these type of activities, and these types of works as well. And then the Prophet ﷺ stated, the verse that I recited, another verse that I recited from إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ, that was revealed when the Prophet ﷺ stated that إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الرَّجُلَ يَتَعَاهَدُ الْمَسْجِدَ فَاشْهَدُوا لَهُ بِالْإِيمَانِ. We're talking about associations. If we associate ourselves with the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the masajid, they are the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. That every single place that is regarded as a masjid, it belongs to Allah. It's the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you enter that house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you should bow and worship no one except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. You should not call onto anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the house of Allah, and it is His right that we call upon Him and we worship Him alone and nobody else, nothing else. So masajid are the house of Allah, and association of someone with the masjid, it elevates that individual as well. Prophet ﷺ said that when you see a person, يَتَعَاهَدُ الْمَسْجِدِ, and another riwayat is يَعْتَادُ الْمَسْجِدِ, person who frequents the masjid, who comes to the masjid regularly, فَاشْهَدُوا لَهُ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Then you can be rest assured, you can close your eyes and give evidence that this person is a true believer. This person has got Iman, with your eyes closed. This is the association with the masjid. Person coming regularly to the masjid, offering salah, you can close your eyes and say that this person is a true believer. And then the Prophet ﷺ recited this verse to support this statement. إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. That verily it is those people who are believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who believe in the last day and the final day, who come to the masjid, and they are associated with the building, the development, the maintenance. Ya'muru, everything comes in that. They come themselves and they participate in the maintenance and the building of masajid. Who? Those people who believe in Allah and those who believe in the final day. So this is a testimony that these people are true believers who have this link and association with masajid. With masajid. And then finally, just given 20 minutes, I think I've got 2 minutes inshallah. I'll just finish on this masajid. I've been talking in a masculine term. When you see a person, or when you see a man coming to the masjid regularly, فَشَهَدُوا لَهُ بِالْإِيمَانِ, you can say that he is a true mu'min. What about women and masjids? I know it's a very long topic, but very briefly. I know in our halaqah, in our society, we don't give too much importance to women and masjids. You go into certain areas, for example, in Leicester, in other places, there are beautiful masjids, and they are full. But unfortunately, the things that I hear, and you probably hear as well, that there are no facilities for sisters. Women are not allowed. In fact, I've read one place that a sister went to the masjid and she was turned away. Said, sorry sister, this masjid is not for sisters. There's no services available here. There's no facilities for sisters. This is a very, very big masjid in Leicester. So what do we have to do? You know, find the countries that we come from, you know, the atmosphere and the circumstances are completely different. But in this country, in the Western society, things are completely different. We have to look at this issue from a completely different angle altogether, especially when we have evidence from hadith that women are allowed to go to the masjid. Women are permitted to go to the masjid. There is no restriction on them. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, you're familiar with him, second Khalifa, and very, very stern and very strong and very strict in everything. His wife used to go to the masjid. He wasn't in favor. So let me make this clear. He wasn't in favor of his wife going to the masjid. And the narration is that his wife used to go punctually, you know, bila naga, salat al-fajr wa salat al-isha. He used to go for fajr prayers and for isha prayers, you know, to the masjid. And Ibn Umar, his son, narrates this hadith. He says that when she was inquired from her that, you know, why do you go to the masjid? Doesn't Umar, doesn't your husband, you know, doesn't he prevent you? Doesn't he stop you from going to the masjid? She's replied that the only reason why Umar doesn't stop me from going to the masjid is because he is aware of this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. Do not stop the female servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from attending the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Umar is aware of that hadith, and it's that hadith that is stopping him from stopping me from going to the masjid. So, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala, one of his qualities, subhanallah, was that kana waqafan inda kitabillah. That when an evidence or any proof that was presented to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to stop. No arguing, you know, no bickering, you know, nothing at all. You present an evidence to him from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to stop. Accept his mistake. Accept his mistake and stop at that. This is the level of sincerity of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. Just finish on this point, that on one occasion Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu was given a khutbah during his caliphate, and what had happened is that people had started fixing astonishing amounts, phenomenal amounts of mahar. Sometimes it was so difficult for people to come forward with that amount of mahar. So he thought that how about putting a restriction, a limit on the amount of mahar that people can fix, so it becomes easy for people to get married. You increase mahar and it becomes difficult to people to afford. What happens is people can't get married, and then one thing leads to another, which is quite obvious, intelligent people sitting here. So if you make marriage difficult, zina will become easy. If you make marriage easy, zina will become difficult. Very easy logic. So he decided that there's going to be a cap, a limit on the amount of mahar that people are going to fix. And he, on Jummah, stood up on the minbar and made this announcement that, you know, what is this that people are fixing on, you know, phenomenal amounts of mahar, making it difficult for people, you know, to marry. I am thinking of putting a cap on that. As soon as he said that, there's an old lady from the back of the masjid. She stood up and she says, "Oh, Umar, you know, who are you to put a restriction on something that Allah hasn't put a restriction on? Who are you to put a cap and a restriction on something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't put a cap and restriction on?" So Umar, baffled, said, "What do you mean? Ya Ummah, what do you mean? Elaborate." And she elaborated, quoted a verse from the Quran. says, وَإِنْ أَعْطَيْتُمُوهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا مِنَ الْمَالِ فَلَا تَأْخُذُوهُ. That although the verses are relating to divorce, it's relating to divorce, but from that we can deduce and deduct the mahar. The verse stipulates that if two people, a man and woman, they get married, and the mahar has been stipulated, and the marriage doesn't work out. The marriage doesn't work out, and they have to separate, go their own ways, and the husband has given the wife mahar. What type of mahar? Qintaran min al-mal. A heap of gold. Dear bar sone, a whole heap of gold. If you've given that as mahar, and you've married her, and you've consummated the marriage, and you're going your different ways, فَلَا تَأْخُذُوا, you can't ask any of that mahar back. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't fixed the amount of mahar. It says a heap of gold. If you've given a heap of gold, as Umar, as soon as he heard this lady state this verse, he says, أَصَابَتِ الْمَرْأَةِ وَأَخْطَأَ Umar. That this lady at the back, she's correct, she's right. Umar has made a mistake. So from now on, you can fix as much mahar as you want. There's no pabandi at all. So we learn, so many things. One is that look how much freedom women had at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, time of Abu Bakr, time of Umar. The women are coming to the masjid. She wasn't in the masjid, that's why she stood up, and Umar had to answer her question. And then the clear-cut hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله, don't prohibit and don't stop the female servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from attending the masajid. And the difficulty is going to be that if we continue stopping sisters, women from coming to the masjid or associating with the masjid or helping out, obviously, you have to maintain, the segregation and the parda and all that. It has to be maintained. But to stop them from coming into what's going to happen? Then the liberals are going to take over. And I assure you, that is going to be really, really difficult to stop. Feminists, liberals, you're hearing these stories about they're being prevented from coming to the masjid. They're going to go and build their own masjid, establish their own masjid. Women going to become imams, men, women standing in the same saf, reading the namaz together.
It's already started.
It's already started, exactly. So why has that started is because we have stopped, stopped allowing sisters from associating with the masjid and being part of the masjid society. So I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us clarity of thinking, gives us wisdom, so we can move forward in a positive way, inshallah, to make the community and the society a much better place to live, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.
I do the Safi, inshallah.
اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد. مسجد نبوی یہ تو بتا کچھ سما وہ کیسا پیارا ہوگا. مسجد نبوی تو بتا کچھ سما وہ کیسا پیارا ہوگا صحن میں آقا بیٹھے ہوں گے گرد صحابہ کا حلقہ ہوگا صحن میں آقا بیٹھے ہوں گے گرد اصحاب کا حلقہ ہوگا بزم نبوت میں صدیق بھی فاروق و عثمان علی بھی رضوان اللہ علیہم اجمعین چاروں یار ستارے ہوں گے بیچ چمکتا چاند ہوگا چاروں یار ستارے ہوں گے بیچ میں چاند چمکتا ہوگا مسجد نبوی تو بتا کچھ سما وہ کیسا پیارا ہوگا تو نے اپنے دروازے پہ وہ بچے بھی دیکھے ہوں گے جن بچوں نے پیار سے اکثر آپ کا دامن تھاما ہوگا جن بچوں نے پیار سے اکثر آپ کا دامن تھاما ہوگا ارض مدینہ بانگے بلالی سے تیری فضا جب گونجتی ہوگی اس کے سرور و سوز کی روح میں ہر کوئی بہہ جاتا ہوگا مسجد نبوی تو بتا کچھ سما وہ کیسا پیارا ہوگا بجز شفاعت جب بھی دعا کو آقا ہاتھ اٹھائے ہوں گے عرش مشیت بجز اجابت طیبہ پہ جھک جاتا ہوگا مسجد نبوی تو بتا کچھ سما وہ کیسا پیارا ہوگا صحن میں آقا بیٹھے ہوں گے گرد اصحاب کا حلقہ ہوگا
Respected brothers, elders, young friends and sisters, the subject of my discussion and speech today is a very, very interesting topic and subject. And understanding this subject and concept is very, very important in Islam. And especially in the time we live in, many youngsters seem to be confused in understanding this subject. The question we face is, why do we need to follow the great scholars of fiqh when we have the Quran and Sunnah, which is divinely protected from error. Now, inshallah, today I would like to cover this topic, inshallah, in some detail. I would like to start, inshallah, to all of us to understand the question. The question is, why do we need to follow the great Imams of fiqh when we have the Quran and Sunnah, which is divinely protected from error? I mean, that is absolutely correct. The Quran and Sunnah, alhamdulillah, is divinely protected from error. This is a divine protection that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected the Quran and Sunnah. But the question is, the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah is not divinely protected from human error, because it depends on the individual who is reading the Quran and Sunnah and applying his understanding. Now, as a Muslim, it is our essential duty to seek knowledge. To acquire knowledge is an essential duty on every Muslim. You know, the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, "Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim," that every Muslim must acquire and seek knowledge. You know, there are many aspects of Islam which pertain to our daily life, which we must acquire and seek. Now, the question is, how do we seek knowledge? How do we acquire knowledge? You know, alhamdulillah, we have books available, we have books in our possession, but are these books sufficient, adequate for understanding the Quran and Sunnah? And in the time we live in, many books, in even Quran translations, Hadith translations, many of them, they have mistakes. I mean, some Hadith translation books they do not have an official stamp, seal, you know, mentioning that there are no errors in the translation. Many a times we pick up a Hadith translation, a Hadith book, and that Hadith book will have mistakes and errors in the Arabic text, and also sometimes in the translation. Now, to learn ilm, do we have to only have books in our possession, or do we need to go to the ulama, to the qualified people? Now, it is very, very important. Every Muslim is recommended to have Hadith translations, Hadith books, Bukhari, Muslim, but at the same time, it is important to read the commentary and also to go to a scholar of the Hadith so that he can explain the Hadith with commentary to you. Now, in the history of Islam, you will never see a scholar becoming a scholar just sitting in a library and reading books. That hasn't happened. You know, a scholar is given credibility because of the knowledge that he has taken from his senior teachers. Now, if you want to see, or if you want to know how good a scholar is, if he mentions the names of his teachers, that will give you reassurance how great that scholar is. Now, normally the term that's used in the Islamic institutes, in the scholarly arena, is al-ilmu min afwah rijal. That knowledge comes not from books, knowledge comes from the mouth of men. I mean, this is why even in the Hadith you have, the chain of narrators. لولا السند لقال من شاء ما شاء. If it wasn't because of the sanad, anyone would be able to say anything and associate that, attribute that to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the knowledge that you and I, that we take from the Quran and Sunnah is of different types, of several types. The first type of knowledge that we take, which is the important type of knowledge, which is ilmul kalam, ilmul imaniyat, ilmul aqaid, the Tawheed aspect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in Allah, the Risalah, the prophethood of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, believing in the angels, believing in the holy books. Now this type of knowledge any Muslim and every Muslim can acquire directly from the Quran and Sunnah. There is no need of doing taqleed of scholars unless a person is studying this science in detail. If you're specializing in this field or in this type of knowledge, then yes, you have to open a book and then go to a scholar. But generally, this type of knowledge, anyone, any Muslim, every Muslim can directly take from the Quran and Sunnah. Now, the second type of knowledge, what we call the do's and don'ts of Islam. For example, the obligation of the 5 daily prayers. Fasting in the month of Ramadan, Hajj being fard, zakat, adultery being haram, stealing being haram, swine and wine being haram. This type of knowledge, again, anyone and everyone can take directly from the Quran and Sunnah. What we say, the do's and the don'ts of Islam. So this type of knowledge, any Muslim and every Muslim can take directly from the Quran and Sunnah. And there's no issue of doing taqleed of scholars. Now the third type of knowledge, which is a different type of knowledge, is given a very special name. This type of knowledge is called fiqh. Now, the literal meaning of fiqh is to understand. Now, the technical meaning of fiqh, in a simple format, the detailed rules of Islamic practices. Now, this type of knowledge, any Muslim and every Muslim cannot take directly from the Quran and Sunnah. Now, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has very clearly mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ وَلِيُنْذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. Chapter 9, verse 121. Now here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing all the Muslims. Not all the believers should go in battle. There should be a section, a group among them that should stay behind. And why should they stay behind? Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word fiqh is used. لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, so that they can acquire the deep understanding of the religion, of the deen. So they can learn the fiqh aspect of deen. And to what level? To the level where they reach the level of ijtihad and fatwa. So when the remaining people come back, these specialist people can teach them, admonish them, that perhaps those people may take warning. So here in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, categorically, is stating that in the Muslim community, there has to be some trained specialists who seek this knowledge to the level where they are qualified to teach it. Not every Muslim can derive directly from the primary sources of our Islamic information. The Quran and Sunnah are the two primary sources of Islamic information. So not any Muslim can derive directly from the Quran and Sunnah. There has to be these specialist group who are qualified to take the knowledge of Islam from the Quran and Sunnah. Now what about if you and I, who are not trained specialists, who are not qualified, wanted to derive directly from the Quran and Sunnah? After all, we read the hadith in Bukhari, volume 9, where it says that when a judge makes judgment and he strives to know a ruling, if he is correct, he gets 2 rewards. فَلَهُ أَجْرًا وَإِنْ أَخْطَأَ فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ وَاحِدٌ. If he makes a mistake, he gets 1 reward. Now here in the hadith of Bukhari, it doesn't refer to any Umar Zaid Bakr's understanding or trying to strive to make a ruling. Here the word ijtihada refers to the scholars who have reached the level of ijtihad. Now when we say ijtihad, in a simple way, ijtihad means when a scholar is a specialist expert in three aspects of Islamic information. He's an expert in the tafsir of the Quran, he's an expert in the hadith, and he's an expert in the fiqh of the deen. Three in one. So it refers to the word ijtihada. So when a judge strives to make a ruling, it's not referring to anyone. It refers to a qualified scholar who fulfills the criteria of ijtihad and all the relevant sciences that the Prophet has taught that relate to the question. Now let me take you further. Another hadith, which is in Abu Dawud, volume 3. Now if a person issues a ruling, to someone and that ruling is incorrect, the ma'siyah, the sin, is not on the person except who gave this ruling. So if someone issues a ruling while being ignorant, that in Islam is a ma'siyah, a sin. Now let me take you further. Another hadith which is in Dawood and Tirmidhi, which is authentic. The Prophet ﷺ has said there are three types of judges. Two will be in Jahannam, and one will be in Jannah. A person who possesses sound knowledge and he judges accordingly, correctly, he will go to Jannah. The second type of judge, a judge who issues the ruling while being ignorant, he will go to Jahannam. The third type of judge, a judge who has sound knowledge, but when he makes a ruling, he makes the ruling unjustly. Again, the Prophet ﷺ said, he will go to Jahannam. So in Islam, if anyone makes an attempt to derive directly from the Quran and Sunnah and issue a ruling, and he is not qualified in the eyes of Allah and in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ, he has done a criminal act. Now let me share with you a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, has given very harsh words on the authority of, this is in Abu Dawud, volume 1, on the authority of Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu. Now he narrates this hadith that we went on a journey. And on this journey there were a large group of companions, Sahaba Ikram. Now one of us was struck by a stone in the head. It caused a gash. It caused a head injury. Now during the night, the person who got this injury, the Sahabi, he had a wet dream. After all, they were human beings, they were insan. So during the night, he had a hajjah, dhrura of making ghusl. So he came to his satis, his companions, and he asked them that, do you find any rukhsah, any dispensation for me? Instead of using water, can I do tayammum? A valid question. Now the companions who were not qualified to answer the question, they were ignorant. They did not know the answer. They gave the wrong answer. They said to him, you're not allowed to you're not allowed to do tayammum. You have to use water. Now it's a long hadith. In Abu Dawud, it's a long hadith. Now, kind of long story short, that person during the journey, he passed away. So when the companions returned to the Prophet ﷺ and narrated the whole incident, the Prophet ﷺ used very harsh words. He said, they killed him. May Allah kill them. Why didn't they ask For surely the remedy for ignorance is to seek knowledge. And this is a well authenticated hadith. For anyone who is not qualified in deriving directly from the Quran and Sunnah should reflect and remember the harsh words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now indeed, many of us, alhamdulillah, we have hadith books, we have Bukhari. Now, this is undisputed. Only a few years ago, a commentary of the Quran in the English language was printed. Prior to that, if someone only understanding English wanted to understand the Quran with commentary, you wouldn't be able to do it in English. You would have to read either Arabic or any other language commentary books, or go to someone who would explain the commentary to you. Now there is no commentary of Bukhari written in English. And I can remember very clearly, alhamdulillah, I was blessed and privileged to study Bukhari with one of the senior teachers in Darul Uloom, Karachi. And it was his 21st consecutive year of teaching Bukhari that year. And during the days when he was teaching us Bukhari, I can remember he said, any student of knowledge who claims, and he said it in Urdu. Now Urdu ka mazhar kuch aur hi hai. He said, Jo padhta hai Bukhari, bagair fath bari, aayega usko Bukhar, lekin nahi aayegi Bukhari. Which means whoever makes an attempt to study Bukhari without reading the commentary, which is Fathul Bari, he will get Bukhar fever, but he will not understand Bukhar. Because no one can claim to read the text or the translation and claim that you understand Bukhari. You got a Fathul Bari here. The commentary, the best commentary written of Bukhari, undisputed in the scholarly arena, is Fathul Bari, written by Hafiz Ibn Hajar Asqalani. And he was given this title of becoming a Hafiz of Hadith. We hear the Hafiz of the Quran. Hafiz of Hadith was given to scholars who had memorized 100,000 Hadith by heart, by memory. Then they were given this title of becoming Hafiz of Hadith. Now, the point I'm trying to make, that why do we need to follow the scholars of the schools of fiqh when we have Quran and Sunnah, which is divinely protected from human error? Yes, the Quran and Sunnah absolutely is protected from any error, but the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah is not. And I'll give you an example. Now in the hadith of Tirmidhi 1 and 2, where the Prophet ﷺ, authentic narration, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever prays the dawn prayer in jama'ah, communally, and thereafter remains preoccupied in the remembrance of Allah, and then after sunrise prays 2 rakats of nafal, he will get the reward of Hajj and Umrah. Now according to the narration of Hadith Anas bin Malik radiyallahu an, the Prophet has said he will get the reward of Hajj completely. Now a person, and this is the educated person, he studied this hadith and he was under the assumption, because he had prayed 2 rakat of nafal, now there was no need for him to go to do his obligatory Hajj. And he was using this hadith as proof. It was only when a teacher of hadith and a scholar explained to him the obligation of an act and then doing something and getting the reward of the act are completely 2 different issues. Now for the general masses, it is essential for them in matters pertaining to fiqh issues. Remember, we don't do taqleed in ilm al-aqaid, issues pertaining to the first type of knowledge which I mentioned. And generally the second type of knowledge, the do's and the don'ts of Islam, or what summarizes the straight path. We don't normally do taqleed in this issue. Taqleed is done in fiqh related issues. It is mandatory, essential for the general masses, and even many of those scholars who have not reached the level of ijtihad to follow one of the schools of fiqh. Now taqleed literally means it's a noun which is derived from the root word qalada, which literally means to grid, to place, to adorn with a necklace. The technical meaning of taqleed is to accept the statement of someone without demanding proof and evidence, on the belief that what he has told you is factual, is according to proof. But you don't ask him, you don't demand him proof and evidence. In other words, taking opinion from experts. In our worldly affairs, we do that day in and out. Taqleed is embedded in human nature. In fact, our intellectual and cultural development is based on taqleed of our parents, teachers and others. In our worldly affairs, we go to the experts and we take their opinion. Now in a hadith which is in Tabarani al-Awsat, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, he gave a sermon, and during the sermon he said, if anyone wants to know anything pertaining to the recitation of the Quran, so if anyone wants to learn anything about the Quran recitation, go to Ubay bin Ka'ab radiallahu anhu. And as we know, he was one of the best Quranic reciters at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If anyone wants to know anything pertaining to inheritance, mirath, then let him go to Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. If anyone wants to know about anything about fiqh, Muslim masail, then let them go to Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu anhu. If anyone wants to learn anything about distributing wealth, then let him come to me, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made me a guardian and protector. Now, taqleed was prevalent even at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the hadith of Bukhari, this hadith is narrated by Aswad bin Yazid radiallahu anhu. And it's in Bukhari, so it's definitely authentic. He narrates that Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, a well-known companion Sahabi, he came to Yemen as a teacher and as a religious authority and a mufti. We asked him a masala regarding a person who has passed away and has left behind a daughter and sister. He decreed half of the estate for the daughter and half for the sister. Now from this is in Bukhari. From this hadith, a number of points can be established. Number one, that the general people of Yemen had put Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu in such high esteem, he was the religious authority of Yemen. And they would approach him for Islamic issues. And he will issue to them a ruling, and the ruling would be without any evidence. It wouldn't be in a form of a Quranic verse or a hadith, quoted a hadith. No. He would just give the Islamic ruling and the general masses would accept it. Number two, the Prophet didn't criticize the people, nor did he criticize Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu. And this hadith is proof for the validity of being taqleed shakhsi, following one scholar in all your religious affairs. And if you look at in the history of Islam, just like hadith evolved, fiqh also evolved. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the likes of the great scholars of fiqh, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they were mujtahid scholars. And Allah accepted their khidamat to such a level that each scholar, his school became, his fiqh became a school of thought consisting hundreds and thousands of some of the greatest scholars this ummah has produced, who checked the fiqh to reassure, to make sure that everything, the whole fiqh, is according to the Quran and Sunnah. And if there was at any stage any need for any ruling to be changed, to be withdrawn, and a new ruling to be issued, that task had been completed during the time of the Khair al-Qurun. You know, the best generations. The time of the Sahaba Ikram, the Tabi'een and Tabi'een. That task was done. You know, it is ludicrous and sometimes absurd to think that we in the 14th beaten century have more knowledge of hadith than the great scholars of the Khair al-Qurun. And this is why even Imam Nawawi, regarding the evolution of fiqh, he mentioned that after the end of the 3rd century, it became an ijma' consensus of the scholars of the time. Anyone who hasn't reached the level of ijtihad, he must, in fiqh, he has to be affiliated with one of the 4 schools of fiqh. Hafiz ibn Abdul Barr has also mentioned the same in Adab al-Ikhtilaf. In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah, in his Fatawa, volume 32, page 66, he has mentioned about this. He said, people are not allowed to take rulings from different schools of fiqh. You have to follow one school of fiqh. And this type of practice, where you start looking at different types of fiqh, different scholars, is not allowed by the ijma' of the whole ummah. Even one of the famous Sheikh Uthaymin, one of the Saudi prominent scholars, I think not so long ago, I think last year he passed away. Even he has mentioned that you're not allowed to seek verdicts from different scholars in order to practice on the one which you think is the most convenient and suitable for you. Because human ego will come in. Now let me give you an example, a practical example. Now someone, he cuts his finger and he starts to bleed. Now according to the Hanafi fiqh ruling, his wudu is broken. But according to the Shafi fiqh ruling, his wudu is not broken. To avoid doing wudu, he decides to take the Shafi opinion. Now later on, he goes home, he touches his wife with desire. Now according to the Hanafi position, your wudu is not broken, as long as nothing is discharged. Wudu for a different Muslim. So according to the Hanafi fiqh, his rule is not broken. But according to the Shafi fiqh, if you touch your wife with lustful intention, your wudu is broken. So to avoid doing wudu, he now chooses to practice on the Hanafi fiqh. Later on, he's hungry and he consumes camel meat. Now according to the Hanbali fiqh, if you consume camel meat, your wudu is broken. Now all different schools of fiqh have got their evidence. He's there after, and then after a certain time, he gets up, it's time for prayer, and he gets up, and he prays his salam. Now according to the vast majority opinion of scholars, is he in a state of wudu? No. His wudu is broken. Now this is what will happen. He is not following the Quran and Sunnah. What is he doing? He is following his ego and his desire. So it's very, very dangerous. And this area must be understood correctly. And from a rational point of view, would you feel rest assured with following your own understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, or would you feel well assured with a school of fiqh consisting of hundreds and thousands of scholars who have reassured that the rulings of that school are according to the Quran and Sunnah? Common sense will tell you, you will feel rest assured with following a school of fiqh. Now, let me give you some insight to what level of knowledge the fuqaha and the mujtahid scholars have when it comes to possessing the level of ijtihad. Now, Hafiz Ibn al-Qayyim, now before coming to that, Hafiz Ibn al-Qayyim has mentioned this in his book, that the Prophet ﷺ was doing taqleed of Jibreel in Islam. The Sahaba were doing taqleed of the Prophet ﷺ. The Tabi'een were doing taqleed of the Sahaba Ikram. Each and every generation was making taqleed of the preceding generation. And this is how deen reached us. And then he talks about in the Sahaba Ikram, approximately the Sahaba Ikram were 124,000. Could be more or it could be less. Now Hafiz Ibn al-Qayyim has mentioned that among them, those that had reached the level of ijtihad and fatwa were approximately 149. So out of 124,000 companions, about 150 were muftis or mujtahids, were scholars, which tells you that not everyone and anyone becomes a great scholar. Only special people of the community reach that level. It's not everyone's ballgame. And then he says that out of 149, 7 were well known among the companions who used to issue rulings excessively. So when in a normal general masses or Sahaba Ikram, whenever they had a dini issue or dini masla, they would go to these 7. 20 or 22 of them would issue rulings in moderation. Sometimes they would issue it, sometimes they wouldn't. And the remaining 120 or 122 would issue rulings very rarely. Despite them being great scholars of that caliber, they would refer them to other scholars of the time. And then he says that the Sahaba dispersed into different cities. And the scholarly Sahaba became the religious authorities. And then he said in Makkah you had Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was the religious authority. You know, the Shaykhun Kabir. You know, the senior mufti that people will go to. In Medina it was Zayd bin Thabit. In Kufa it was Abdullah bin Masud. In Basra it was Hazrat Anas radiallahu anh. In Yemen it was Ma'ad ibn Jabal. And then the student that they taught among the Tabi'een, they became religious authorities in their cities. Now, just to give you some insight of what level of knowledge they possess. Now, Hafiz Ibn al-Qayyim in his book I'Lamul Mu'awwiqeen, he's mentioned this, that one of the students of Ahmad bin Hanbal, Muhammad ibn Ubaidullah ibn Munadi, he said, I was sitting in a gathering where one of the students of Ahmad bin Hanbal asked his Shaykh, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, that to be a faqih, to be an expert in fiqh knowledge, to be an expert in sacred law, how many ahadith does one have to have memorized? So the student said, what about 100,000? Is that sufficient? He said no. He said 200,000? He said no. 300,000? He said no. 400,000? Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, with his hand gesture, he made a signal that perhaps about that many. So just imagine. And even if we say here, when they're talking about hadith, they're including all the hadiths with different sanad. So the matan, the text may be the same, but the difference of the chain of transmission may differ. And even if you were to say, for argument's sake, the statements of the Sahaba Ikram are also included in the definition of hadith. We're still talking about well over 50,000 hadith. Now, in a scholar, there are mainly two aspects that he has to have mastery in. The first aspect is what we call the substantive knowledge. So all the relevant texts. He has to have memorized all the relevant texts. So a mujtahid scholar doesn't have to be a hafiz of Quran, but all the verses of the Quran which are related to fiqh issues, he has to have memorized all those verses of the Quran. Now, with regards to grammar, all the different types of grammar, he has to be an expert. He has to know all the verses of the Quran which have shani nuzul, which means many verses of Quran are revealed because of a certain incident, or there was a background reason to the revelation when it was revealed. Something happened, some incident occurred. And also in the hadith you have shani urud. Sometimes the Prophet did something or mentioned something because of a certain reason. They have to know all the shani nuzul and all the shani urud. Now another aspect is to understand that if any verses of the Quran or any hadith which may seem to contradict, they don't contradict, but if you take it on face value, they may seem to contradict one another. He has to know and have the tools by which he can join two verses or hadith which may seem to contradict one another. Now let me give you an example. Now in Bukhari you have a hadith when the Prophet ﷺ was returning from the Khaybar journey, and he was on a camel or a horse, most probably a camel. And during that journey, his thigh part, the thigh, became exposed. And this is in Bukhari. There's authentic narration. And yet the teachings of the four schools of fiqh, the thigh is a aura, is a part of nakedness. So what happens here? The Sahih hadith, authentic hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ had exposed it. Now the scholars of fiqh, they were well aware of that authentic hadith, but they were also well aware of other authentic hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ had commanded the companions to cover the thigh because it is aura, it is part of nakedness. So these scholars of fiqh, they were well aware of all the hadiths under that subject. Now for people, sometimes people become narrow-minded. Yes, the most authentic hadith book or books are Bukhari and Muslim. As-Sahih al-Kitab ba'da Kitabillah al-Bukhari. The most authentic hadith book in the corpus of hadith books is Bukhari, undisputed. Then Muslim. Then we talk about the Sahih Sittah. But this is not the 6 authentic books of hadith, is not all the hadith books. There are thousands of hadith books. I'll give example. Many of the Sahabas, companions who were scholarly companions, they issued rulings. And their rulings have been preserved in hadith books. And many of us, we don't know these things because we've never had access to them. Musannif ibn Abi Shayba, Musannif Abdul Razzaq, Sharh Ma'an al-Athar. These are books which contain fatwas of scholarly Sahaba. Now, there are many other authentic hadith books which have hadith in them. In fact, Imam Muslim, in his Muqaddamah, in the beginning, in his introduction, he mentions very clearly that the number of hadith that I have compiled are far less than the number of hadith that I have left. So there are many other hadith books which contain many authentic narrations. In a Mustadrak Hakim, ala Shart al-Shaykhain, there's another hadith collection. All the hadiths according to the conditions of Imam Bukhari and Muslim, which were not included in Bukhari and Muslim, this great scholar Imam Hakim has compiled them in his famous collection. So sometimes we seem to get deluded that we are become very confined to books of hadith. And like I said in the beginning, it is very, very important. Every Muslim, every youngster is encouraged to have on your bookshelf a collection of hadith books, translations. But it's very, very important that you don't start to become a self-declared, self-made scholar. And it's very easy to do. And especially in the time we're living in now, in the social media. Before people would have start taking out hadith books or translations and make an attempt to sit down. Nowadays, you got Mufti Google. And straight away, people start, many a time the information on the internet is not even correct. And there are many non-Muslims, Orientalists, under Islamic names, under beautiful names, given rulings of Islam. And they're doing it in a very deceiving way. And they start causing you confusion. And before you know it, they start creating doubts on you. They start creating doubts on you. And then you become confused.com. So it's very, very important that we keep our link and learn hadith the Islamic traditional way through scholars. And I will encourage everyone, if you haven't participated in a Darth-e Hadith of Bukhari, there's many cities, alhamdulillah, in UK where lectures of Bukhari are conducted. I will encourage people to go and participate, to take some time out and to participate and get some insight to what level of explanation and commentary is given by the teacher when he's delivering the Dars of Bukhari. You'll be very, very surprised. And then you will realize that how much my own teacher, where I studied from, is just imagine 21 years of teaching one hadith book. He'll be an expert in that. He'll be a specialist. But if he never prepared the previous night, I can remember one day that year, his father passed away. And he came the next day and he goes, revise, I'm not teaching today. And we thought maybe the bereavement had some, effect on him. He goes, no, the reason why I'm not teaching is because I was preoccupied because of the bereavement. I haven't made my preparation. And he goes, every year, the preparation I make, and it's not just like us sitting for 10, 20 minutes, getting some, commentary with translation, but hours, several hours. Their preparation is for several hours. And he said every year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases my knowledge. So I would encourage you that if you to get an opportunity to go and sit in a lesson of Bukhari and just observe. Just observe, and then you will realize to what level of commentary there is regarding this famous hadith book. So coming back to what I said in the beginning, why do we need to follow the great scholars of fiqh when we have the Quran and Sunnah? Now the information that I've given you today, and this topic is very vast. You could go on for hours and hours and days. But I'm hoping the information that I've shared with you reassures you for your own protection. And also remember, many scholars, Imam Muslim, Hafiz ibn Hajar, With the name they had Shafi'i or Hanbali. Why? Even though they had reached such level of Islamic knowledge, because they felt that they had to be affiliated with one of the four schools of fiqh. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding to appreciate these four schools of fiqh, and they consist of hundreds of great scholars. You know this, and alhamdulillah, the beauty is all the masail from the day a person is born until you die, every masla has been written in book form, and alhamdulillah, you have relevant scholars who can practically teach you their fiqh. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to act upon what has been mentioned today. I was told to talk about 40 minutes. So inshallah, I've covered my time. Maulana Zaim and myself, we will be here inshallah with you guys inshallah after food. So if there's any kind of questions, feel free. And unfortunately, within the last, I think, 15-20 years, it's become quite a phenomenon in youngsters, especially in universities. I work as a chaplain in prison, become a phenomenon in prison as well, that youngsters are questioning the validity of doing taqleed and not understanding the issue. And yet, it's perplexing because you've gone to university to do a degree, right? To go to the experts, listen to their lectures, and follow the traditional way. But yet when it comes to the sciences of the Quran and Sunnah, you think you can understand in the confines of your own home and through your own understanding. But this is very, very dangerous. It's a crucial thing, a crucial issue which needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be understood. So both of us will be here. Maulana Abdullah is here as well. Feel free, if you got any questions, feel free to approach us, right? And we'll sit down and talk to you inshallah. So wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair, Allah accept and grant us understanding. Although this was not planned, we supposed to just conclude our majlis with dua and proceed for food. I'd just like to request Maulana Rozeb Sahib